Hey there everyone, I am the seller of Easy Input Remapping on the Unreal Engine Marketplace, and in this video I'm just going to be showing you guys how to actually use it in your project. So I got a couple requests for, people couldn't really figure out how to actually use the plugin. A lot of people could, but there were just some beginners that maybe didn't quite understand blueprints so well. So, and also in 4.17 we got a new node that will a new thing that will help us do this a lot easier. Because in the previous versions we would have had to write a lot of code just for our controls menu, but in 4.17 we got a thing called the Input Key Selector, which will pretty much listen for keys when we want the user to remap an input binding to another key. So I'm just in my project here. Basically what I've got is just a character setup, and we can walk around, we can jump, pretty basic. We can't turn, but that doesn't really matter for the sake of this tutorial. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have the plugins installed to your engine version. Okay, so I'm just going to come in here to my launcher. You can see I have an Easy Input Remapping down here. If we click Install to Engine, you can see we have the different engine versions we can install it to. Now, I don't see 4.17 in this list, which is the version I'm using. The reason is I already have this installed to 4.17, so we can just ignore that. Just make sure you have it installed, basically. And now you want to open up your project, and then just go to Edit, Plugins, and you'll want to look for Easy Input Remapping in here. For me, it's at the top under Installed, and you want to make sure it's enabled. Okay, and then we do need to restart the engine. Of course, for that to load. So I'll just give this a second to open up. I just want to mention, so the thing I will be showing you, I'll pretty much be showing you how to set up a little control menu where the player can change the keys mapped to certain inputs. You will need 4.17 to follow along exactly, but you definitely don't need 4.17 just to use the plugin. In previous versions there is a bit more of a setup, just because you do have to set up a way for the game to listen for which keys were pressed. But I do have a demo project uploaded on the product page that you can look at, which has a setup for earlier versions. So I'm just going to load into my map here since I didn't have it set as the default. And now let's just make sure our plugin actually works. So I'm just going to go into any blueprint, doesn't really matter. I just want to make sure I have the nodes. So if I search Easy Input Remapping, you can see I do have all the nodes. So I know it's installed properly. I know that it's loaded properly. It's enabled and everything. So we have all of these nodes. I won't go over these right now. First we're going to make our widget, our controls menu. So let's start with that. I'm just going to go into my blueprints folder, and we'll do new user interface and widget blueprint. So I'm just going to call this controls menu, and we're just going to go into here, and so I'm just going to show you what we'll be doing. So go ahead and search in the palette. We'll search for Input Key Selector, and we'll just drag that into here, and we'll just leave it there. We're going to be deleting this in a second anyways. So I'm just going to show you what this does. So let's go ahead and click on it, and then in the details panel scroll to the bottom, and then click the plus on this on key selected. Okay, then drag out from here, type in break. We're going to break the input chord, and then from the key we're going to do get display name, get key display name, and we're going to print string. Okay, now you don't have to do this. I'm just going to show you really quick what this does. So we are just going to, I'm just going to drag these on here. We're basically just going to print what happens when we press a key. You'll see what I mean in a second. Oh, whoops. And one more. There we go. And we'll change the duration to 10 seconds. Okay, so basically when we press a new key, we will output the key, and then whether we have Shift, Control, Alt, or Command to the screen. So we can go ahead and test that. If we play right now, we won't have anything on the screen, so we do need to add our controls menu to the screen. So I'm just going to do that in my level blueprint. You can do this anywhere else though. So I'm going to do blueprints, open level blueprint. Then on event begin place, this is when the level begins playing. We're going to do create widget. And then I can of course just do controls menu, and I still need to add it to the viewport, otherwise we won't be able to see it. So we'll just do add to viewport. And we're going to compile and save, and if we play, you can see we do have this on the screen. So if we go ahead and click it, it changes to 3 dots. So now it is listening for us to press a new key. Okay, so I can do, I don't know, we'll do spacebar. So you can see it prints out spacebar and then 4 falses. So you can see spacebar is cut off. That doesn't really matter right now. Let's go ahead and do. So now I'm gonna press Control and space, right? So say I don't know. There's a couple of games where you might need to press Control Alt or whatever in combination with the key. So we'll do we'll do Control F. Okay. So you can see it does say Control F up here. So it's F, false, true, false, false. So this true, so that's the second one. So you can see, I'll just close that of that real quick. So the second true was, where am I? Okay. So I guess the second one was Control being pressed. Yeah, so it was an F, and then we didn't have a Shift. We did have a Control, so that was true, and then false, false. So you can kind of see what this does, and basically what we'll be setting up is we'll have the different controls such as jump. Then next to jump, it will have this little thing, and it will show, spacebar. If they wanted to change that, they would click this, and then type in the new key, and then say they did F. Then F would be the button that makes them jump. So we're going to be setting that up right now. So let's go ahead and we're actually going to make a new widget. We're going to make a template for our inputs, right? So that we don't have to copy and paste a ton of stuff. We can just make one template and use it once for each input. So let's go ahead and add a new widget blueprint. And I'm just going to call this, I don't know, input template single. You'll see why I said single in a moment. We're going to make a second one for something else, but name doesn't really matter. I mean, I imagine it does in your project, but not for me. So in here, we're just going to add, actually we're going to delete the canvas panel. Then I'm going to make a size box. If you're not familiar with UMG, then you should just be able to follow what I'm doing. I'm going to change this to desired on screen so I see exactly how big it is. So the size box is just how big our thing is going to be. So we'll do, I don't know, 300 width override, and then maybe 50 height. And that looks good. We might need to change it, but now inside of the size box we're going to add a horizontal box. So we want two things to be side by side. Okay, and then inside the horizontal box we're going to add a text. So this will be like what our key is. So say for example jump. And we're just going to center that so it's not at the top. Then next to the jump I want, I don't know, let's say our input key selector. So we can add that to the horizontal box as well. I do want this to be on the side. Okay, so I'm going to click so it fills, and then I'm going to align it to the right. Now this isn't very pretty, but that doesn't really matter. I'm sure you'll want to customize it however you like in your project. So we have jump and then empty. So that's all good. Now what we need to do is we need to go into our graph. Okay, and we'll add a variable. We'll call this input name. And we will change the variable type to a name. A name is basically just what you use for identifiers. It's kind of like a string, but it isn't case sensitive, so it's really good for identifying things. So this input name will represent what our input is actually called. So if we go into project settings, we can do edit project settings, and then we go down here to input. We have our action and access mappings. So the name would be, for example, jump, or walk forwards, backwards, or walk left, right. So we'll just add that. Now we will go back into our controls menu, go to the designer again, and this time we're going to add a input template single, right? So we're going to add the new thing we just made. So we can drag this out here, and you can see, we can put a bunch of them. This is what I meant by we don't have to copy and paste everything, right? Because we just have 2 widgets instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll just add that, and one last thing we forgot, we need to go back into our input template single, click on input name variable again, and we want this to be instance editable and exposed on spawn. Now we'll compile that and save, go back into the controls menu. Now you can see if we click on this, in the details panel we do have our input name variable, right? So say we drag 2 of these out here, we could have one that's, jump, so that's the key it's going to remap, and then one which would be walk forwards, backwards, right? And then if you change the key, it would change the key of that input. Okay, and we'll set that up in a second. But you can see what that did, right, when we made it editable. So now we can edit that variable. So for now, we actually want to add, I guess we'll add a vertical box because we want these to be stacked vertically. So we'll just, make this however big. We'll just put it wherever. Then we're going to drag a bunch of these input template singles. We'll only drag 3 of them because that's how many inputs I have in this project. So we'll just drag those into here. And I'm just going to delete this other one. And I'm going to delete this because we no longer need that. And I'm, of course, going to delete the code for that. Okay, now we'll go back into our designer. So you can see we do have all of these. Okay, so we have the key. Now one thing you do notice is all 3 of these say jump. Now we don't want them to because they're not all going to be for jumping. So we want the end user to know that they're not all for jumping. So we need to create a new variable which will just be what this text says. So I'll just create a new one. And this could be of type text. Text is used for like interface stuff if you want it to translate to different languages with localization. It's basically a string. We can just call this friendly name. Then we of course make this instance editable and exposed on spawn as well. And then basically we want this text to be whatever this friendly name variable contains. So let's go ahead and click on our text. Right now we have no way of setting it, right? If we type what's it called, text block. If we type text block in here, we don't really have anything. So we need to make this a variable. So click on your text, then click is variable, or rename this to, oh, whoop, I froze up. Oh, there we go. Or rename this to friendly text. And then we'll compile, go back into our graph. You can see we now have this friendly text variable we can use. And we can do something like set text, set text, text. And so what we're going to do is, on event pre-construct, we're going to set the text to whatever our variable is. Okay, so we'll set it to friendly name. Okay. Now you can see if we compile and we go back into our controls menu, you can see it's now blank. But if we type in a friendly name here, so we'll do jump, you can see it does show up. Now this could be walk forwards or backwards. Alright, so you can see it now does that. The reason we use event pre-construct instead of event construct is event pre-construct is called in the editor, right? If it was just construct, it wouldn't the changes wouldn't show up until we were in the game. We wouldn't be able to see it live in the editor. So now that we've got that set up, I guess I'll do this one. which will be walk left, right. Walk left or right, I'll call it. Okay. Now, I'm just going to set this up to change what the jump does for now. So, inside of the input template single, that's where we'll set that up. So we're going to go ahead and click on the input key selector, and then once again we'll do on key selected. And now, basically, when the user chooses a new key, we want to change the actual input to use that new key. Right now, if we were to, put in a new key for jump, it wouldn't do anything. In fact, let's look at that. Now, right now, I jump with spacebar. If I change this like an F, I still jump with spacebar. So we need to make it actually use that new key that we entered. So inside of this input template single, we are going to. Okay, so let's look at the various nodes we have with easy input remapping. So I can just type in easy, and here we go. So what I want to do is I want to rebind the action mapping. Okay, for jump it's an action mapping, for the others it's an axis mapping. So I'm just going to do the jump first because it's the simplest. So we want to rebind the action mapping. So what mapping do we want to rebind? Well, let's see. We want to rebind the mapping input name. Okay, so in this case, for jump, it would be jump. Okay, so we want to rebind jump. And we want to rebind it from... We can't just do jump. We have to do the jump, which is a spacebar. So we want to rebind the spacebar jump to our new data. So we can do make. So what do we want to rebind it to? Well, we want to rebind it to this selected key here. So we can break that. Okay. So we want to rebind jump with spacebar to jump with our new key, and then any modifiers we use. Right, so if we use alt, we want to use jump alt, or whatever else. Okay, so let's go ahead and test that. We will do rebind action mapping, compile, save. Okay, and I'll just show you. So this is jump spacebar, right? That should work if we test it. Yeah, let's go ahead and test it. Okay, so right now it's spacebar to jump. We can change that to an F. And then, let's see, it's actually not refreshing. Let's see why. Maybe I missed something. Okay. I think we didn't set... Oh yeah, we didn't set our input name. So we need to click on jump and then set the input name to jump. Right, so input name is the actual name in here that it will use. Right, and we don't have an... Oh yeah, so yeah, we just need to set that. So now if we play, it should work. So I can jump with spacebar. I change that to an F. I can no longer jump with spacebar. Okay, and you can see in the project settings actually is now an F. Okay, so now I press F and it jumps. If I exit and go back again, it's still an F, right? I mean, you can't see what button I'm pressing, but it is an F. So now the problem is that this doesn't change. This doesn't automatically set itself, right? When I start the game, it says empty, even though it's F. So now we need to have it set what it actually is, so that we can see that. So let's go ahead and look at what we can do for that. So I've actually never used this input key selector before making this video. So let's go ahead. I want to see if we have a way of setting this right when the game starts. I guess we can just set empty. So for example, if we set this to F, then it would just default to F. You'll see what I mean. Oh, maybe not. Whoops. That's odd. Okay, anyways, we'll look at this. So I'm just gonna play around 1 second. So let's see, set text. I'm just gonna see what this does. Test. Okay, so yeah. So what we want to do is, when we first start playing, we basically want to check what this is, and then set this thing. So instead of saying test, it would say whatever key it's actually using. So, on event constructs, so when the game starts playing, we want to get the mapping called jump. Okay, so we want to get that. So we have another node. If we type in easy input remapping, we have get all action mappings. Okay, so jump is an action mapping, so we're going to use get all action mappings. Okay, so what mapping do I want to get? Well, let's look at the filter data. So we want to get the mapping name called input name, right? So whatever our input name is, we want to get that mapping. So in this case, it would be we want to get jump, and then we don't care what the key is because it could be any. And then in filters, we're going to do make array. So we want to filter the name. So we want to get all mappings whose name is our input name. So whose name is jump. Okay? And then I know for a fact that inside of jump, right, we don't have a bunch of them. We're just going to have one, which is, F or spacebar or whatever. So we're just going to get the first, so it's going to give us a list. So we're just going to get the first item. Okay? So this will basically give us our key. So if we do break, so it'll give us the key. So we're going to set this from empty. Instead of being empty, it will be whatever our key's display name is. Okay, and you'll see how this works in a second. Let's go ahead and play. Okay, so you can see it does change to F, right? Basically, it's looking for, well, it depends on what our filter is. So we have filters, so we're filtering for name. So we're going to find any mappings that have whose name is whatever input name variable is. And there's of course going to be one of those. So we just get the first thing, then we set this to this display name. Okay. And you can of course use different things as well, but that's basically how to use this node. Now let's go ahead and set up the other ones. So I'm just going to go into my controls menu, and I'm just going to set the input name for these. So let's go ahead. Okay, so we have it working for jump basically. Right, F, does that, and spacebar. It actually is a bug right now though. Let's go ahead and fix that. So in here, we're rebinding from jump with spacebar to jump with our new key. The problem is, right now, we can't rebind from jump with spacebar to jump with something else if we don't have a jump with spacebar in here, right? So instead of having it do from jump with spacebar, we just want to do from jump to whatever it currently is. Okay? So we can just copy this. So we'll rebind from jump with whatever key it currently is to jump with our new key. Okay? Now it should work for us to go from F to, say G. And it does work. Right, before it would only work if our thing was already spacebar. Okay, so that works. Now let's go ahead and, okay, so everything's working with our action mappings, okay, which is jump. Okay, everything is working 100% fine. The problem is that the walk forwards or backwards and walk left or right, they're not action mappings, they're axis mappings, because they're used for, like, movement. You'll see what I mean if you were to look in, like, the first-person template. They use the same thing, right? They use axis mappings for movement. If we go into our project settings, we can see we do have axis mappings, then, so we've got walk forwards, backwards, and then walk left, right. So, for these, the problem with these with our current setup is that these use two keys, okay? It isn't just, like jump where we have one key, right, which is a G. For walk forwards, backwards, we have W, which goes forward, and then S, which goes backwards, right? So we have two things with one key. So I'm actually going to make a new widget for this, okay? So instead of having, this widget which only has one field to change the key, we're going to make one that has two, okay? So I'm just going to copy our current input. I'm just going to duplicate this, and we'll do input template pair, right? So it'll be a pair of two. Inside here, we're going to make some changes. So it'll be the same thing, right? We have our friendly text, and we have our key. We'll actually need two input key selectors. So I'm going to wrap this inside of a vertical box. And then we're going to add a text inside of here. Whoops. You'll see what I'm doing in a second. So I'll change this to like forward. And then I do need to change my size box. I'll change the height to 100. Okay, and I'll set that to that. Okay, so we'll have one for forward, and I'm just going to copy this vertical box. And then we'll have one for backwards. So inside here I'll change this to backwards. Okay, so now we do have two. And I do want to make this bigger so we have more space. Do like 500. Okay, I'm just going to do fill, right. Actually, I'm going to do auto. Okay, so you'll see what I'm doing in a second. Let's go ahead and compile. So now we have our new thing, which does have two, right? So it'll work with that. So we'll go back into our controls menu, and then we want to delete these because we need to add the new one. So we want to add the input template pair. So we'll add that to the vertical box. Okay, we'll set the friendly name to walk forwards or backwards. Okay, so walk forwards or backwards, we can set the forward input and the backwards input, right? So the forwards input we'd set W, and the backwards we'd set S. Okay, it isn't the prettiest, but it works. So let's go ahead. I'm going to do one more thing to make this look a little bit better. So inside of here, you can see we have a vertical box for these two. I want these to be on the right side, so I'm going to wrap them inside of a horizontal box. If we have it in here, there we go. And I'm going to set this to fill and right align. And you don't need to do this, it's just what I'm doing to make it look better. It really just depends on your project style. Okay, so you can see now, for jump we just have one key, and then for walk forwards or backwards we have two, right? One forwards, one for backwards. Now right now these actually won't change anything, so that's what we're going to set up now. So the setup for changing the pair is a little bit different than the other one. It's not too difficult though. So go ahead and I'm just going to click on my input key selector, and I'm going to change the name of this input key selector left, and this will be input key selector right. Okay, and I'm going to add a little bit of padding to this so we have more space. Oh, whoops, wrong thing. I'll do that in here. Again, just to make this look a little bit more acceptable. Okay, now there is that little gap in between those. Okay, so for this, let's go ahead and look at things. So let's go ahead. So we're going to go into our controls menu. So we have the friendly name set. Now let's set the input name. That's just going to be walk forwards backwards. I'll just copy that from there. Okay. So when we click forwards, we don't just want to rebind. It's not with jump where we can just rebind the first thing, right? We have jump and we only have the one thing, right? So we just rebind the first thing to our new key. With walk forwards or backwards, we have two things that we need to rebind, okay? Now, let's go ahead. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so we want to rebind we want to rebind a different one of these based on which actual, whether we click the left or right thing. So, for the first ones on key selected, instead of, yes, we'll rebind the first item, okay? Right, which is item 0. Now we also need to add all this for the second one. So we can click on key selected, and then we'll just copy all of this. It's going to be pretty much the same. Okay, we'll link that up, and we'll connect this to here. Okay, so for the first one, we're going to rebind the first key. For the second one, we're going to rebind the second key. Okay, so we'll rebind number 1, which is the second element in our list. Right, so this is going to get every single key that's listed under here. There's going to be 2, and then we'll rebind the different one based on which of these we clicked. So let's go ahead and we're going to test this. Or actually, no, we need to change this from an action mapping to an axis mapping, right, because they're different. So we'll just do rebind axis mapping. Okay, so we'll rebind it from, let's go ahead and do make. We'll rebind it from our input name. And we actually need to replace a few things. So we'll do get all axis mappings instead of get all action mappings. We'll get that. I'm just going to replace these here. Okay, we'll do make array. Okay, sorry if this is confusing. You should be able to follow along though. Okay, so we're just changing it from using the action mappings to the axis mappings. Okay, so we're gonna get all the axis mappings whose name is our input name. Okay, so walk forwards, backwards. All right, so this will give us both of these or both of these. Okay, so we are going to rebind from walk forwards, backwards with whatever key it's using. Okay, so we can just connect the key up and whatever scale it's using to our new key. Okay, which we can do make axis mapping and okay, we'll change this to an axis mapping, so make axis mapping struct. Okay, so we'll rebind from, say, walk forwards, backwards with the S key to, and -1 scale to walk forwards, backwards with the, I don't know, R key with a -1 scale. Okay, so we'll rebind to the new key. The axis mappings, we're not going to use any of the modifier keys, but we want to keep the scale. Okay, and this should work. Actually, we need this for both of them, so we can delete this. We need the same functionality for the left and the right input key selectors, other than one little thing. Yeah, so we'll connect that up. And then we will get the second item in the list. Okay, and we need to connect that there. Okay, now this should work. Let's go ahead and test it. Let's just make sure everything looks good. Okay, I think everything's going to work. So right now we have S with -1 and W with -1. Okay, let's go ahead and play. And you can see these are none and empty. We'll fix that in a second. So let's try and change forwards to use the R key. Okay, let's check if that changed. Okay, so instead of changing the forwards, it actually changed the backwards. So this was an S. I wanted to change the forwards. Now why that happened is this one changes the first item and this one changes the second item, right? The problem is that they were backwards, right? So it was like S here, right? So the forwards tried to change the first item, which was S. The reason for this is that, annoyingly enough, the mappings inside of Unreal Engine, it actually alphabetizes these, right? So if we added like a, I don't know, a Z, I don't know, let's do an A. So if we add an A, it actually will go to the top. Or it should if we play. Yeah, oh, maybe not. I don't know, it does some weird things. Maybe it's a scale. I'm actually not sure. But basically, we need to make sure we remap the correct item. Okay, so instead of just remapping the first item, we want to remap the item with a scale of 1, right? Because 1 is going forwards, -1 is going backwards, right? So inside of our input template pair, instead of just getting all axis mappings with just the name, we want to get all axis mappings with the name, and we also want to match the scale, okay? So we want to get the mappings that are called walk forwards backwards and have a scale of 1, okay? Which is only going to give us 1, because you can see in here there's 1 with walk forward, there's 2 with walk forwards backwards, and then there's 1 that has a scale of 1. Okay, so this, alright, we're matching the name and the scale, so this and this. It will always give us the W, right? Regardless of which key this is, right? This could be a spacebar, it will always give us the one with a scale of 1. Okay, so now let's see if that works. Okay, so now we're going to try and change the W, right? Last time it changed the S. So we'll click on the forwards and change that to an R. Change the look in the project settings. Okay, you can see it did change, right? So instead of having an S and a W, we have an S and an R. And it actually did flip the order, you can see, because it is alphabetized. Right, so now the R, this was a W, but now the R is on top. Okay, now we can press R, and that does let us walk forwards, and then S is still backwards. So one problem, okay, so we made that change for forwards, right? So it'll get the name and the scale. We want to do the same thing with the backwards one. So it will grab the name and the scale as well, but this will use a scale of -1. Okay, so it's looking for the thing called walk forwards backwards. Okay, so it's looking for this. Then underneath that, it's looking for the thing with a scale of, you can see scale -1. Okay, and there will only be one of those, right? There's only one thing with -1. So we want to actually get the first element for this instead of the second one. Okay, so now let's see if we can change the S. Okay, I want to change that to, I don't know, a Z. Okay, so we'll do Z. Go to project settings, and you can see it did change. So instead of, yeah, so you can see it's now a Z with -1. Okay, now Z makes me walk, oh, whoops. Accidentally changed that to a Z as well. Yeah, I'll change these back to a W and an S. And you can see it did change. Yeah, and they flipped order again. So, now one problem we have is that these, so G for jump work, it works fine, right? We can see that it is G. These are still set to none and empty. Okay, so we still need to make these load the default value. So we'll go into controls or input template pair, go up to event construct, that's where we set the default value. So again, this is still an axis mapping, or an action mapping. We need to change this to an axis mapping. So we'll change that. We'll do get all axis mappings like before. And we're looking for the same thing as before. So we're looking for the axis mapping called walk forwards backwards, or just whatever this variable is. And then we actually need to do the same thing as down here. So I'm just going to delete this. Okay, so we're looking for the walk forwards backwards with a scale of 1. Okay, and that's what we'll set this to. Okay. Yeah, so we'll set the left one to that. Go ahead and break that. It'll get the display name from there. Now we're going to copy all of this and do it again for the right side. Okay, so we'll copy and paste that. Okay, so for the right side, we'll do the same thing, except we're looking for the thing with a scale of -1. Okay, so -1. And still the first item. Now you can see if we play, We do have that. So let's see, it is showing S and empty. Oh, whoops, I did the wrong thing. So it was setting the text of the left twice. We need to set the left for the left, and we'll need to change this one to the right. Okay, now that should show a W and an S. And it does. Okay. So I can change this to, I don't know, a Z. And you can see that does reflect inside of here. So a Z and an S. So that back to a W, and there we go. Right, we can walk forwards and backwards with W and S, as expected. Okay. Let's see. And just to clarify on how this get all axis mappings node works, this just filters. So if we just do get all axis mappings, like this, and then we just used this, right, it would give us a list of every single mapping in here, right? So we'd have all axis mappings, so we'd have 4, right? We'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because we're not filtering for anything, right? Now, say we only wanted to get the axis mappings with a scale of 1, that would give us 2 results, so W and D, right? Those both have 1. How we would do that is we would set up a filter for scale, and then in the filter data, so it knows what scale to use, we change the scale to 1. Whoops, 1. Okay, so that's just how this node works. I just wanted to clarify that. Right, because we're only filtering for scale, the key and the mapping don't matter. This is just to tell it what values to actually use. So let's go ahead and make sure there's no bugs. Let's see, walk forwards, backwards. Okay, that works good. Yeah, so it doesn't look like we have bugs so far. Let's go ahead and we'll add the walk left and right. Okay, because we have walk forwards, backwards, and then walk left, right. So we can do that in Controls menu. Again, we'll just add an input template pair, and we'll set the input name to, what's it called? Walk left, right, I think it is. Then friendly name, we can do walk left or right. There we go. So the problem is this still says forwards and backwards for both of these. Reason being, I just hard-coded it in here. So we'll make 2 new variables. So that represent, same as how we did with the friendly name. We'll make 2 new variables that represent what these will be. So we can make those. So input, I don't know, we'll call this left input name. That will be a text. Whoops. Then we'll instance editable and exposed on spawn. Then another one, right input name. And same thing, instance editable and exposed on spawn. Okay, then in event pre-construct, same as how we set the friendly text to friendly name, we're going to set the, and we need to make these variables. Click on these, is variable. So text block left, and we'll set this to text block right. Change that to an is variable as well. Compile. Okay, so we're going to set the text block left text to left input name. Okay, we're going to copy this, do the same thing for the right. Okay, we'll change text block left to text block right. You can actually drag that onto there to replace it. Okay, and if we go into Controls menu, you can see these are now empty. So we'll click on this one, we'll set the left input name to forwards and backwards. And then for left or right, D is 1, okay? So we actually want to do, okay, so left is -1. So we'll want to do right and left. Okay, right, because the left side uses the scale of 1. Okay, now our thing with a scale of 1 is actually walk right, which is D. Hopefully that's not too confusing, but you see it should work. So D is right. I can change that to a Z. Okay, so now we have Z and A. Right, Z takes us to the right. and A takes us to the left. Okay, so that's all working good. One thing you might want to change, let's pretend that, actually I'm going to change these really quick just to make it a little bit easier to understand. So I'm going to flip these in my demo character. I'm going to flip it. Ignore what I'm doing right now. This is just to help you guys understand better. Okay. And here I'm going to change this to left and right like it should be. Right. Okay. So now it should be a little bit easier to see. So we have A and D. Okay, so if we play, yeah, so left is A, D is right. Okay, so that's how it should be. Let's just go ahead and pretend. Let's say we have a scenario where we used a scale of 2. Okay, so 2 and -2, right? I don't know, say we wanted to walk twice as fast left and right. Right, we'd have a different scale because it multiplies our value by the scale. So if we have a scale of like 2, or I don't know, say it was 0.5 instead of 1, right, so 0.5 and -0.5, then it actually wouldn't work. Okay, and you can see why. You can see it is none, and like, this actually does not work. Let's change that to like an F. You can see we don't have, it doesn't work if we use a different scale. Reason being, what it's doing is it's looking for our thing, but it's looking for it with a scale of 1. Okay, so it's looking inside of walk left right for something that has a scale of 1 and something that has a scale of -1. The problem is we don't have anything. Okay, so it's actually using, it should look for a scale of 2 and -2. The problem is this uses a scale of 1. Okay, so we need to set up a variable for which scale it should actually look for. Okay, so let's go into our input template pair. We'll create 2 new variables. So one will be called left scale. That will be a float, which is just a number that has decimal points. And right scale. We can get rid of this one here. Okay, and we'll make both of these instance editable and exposed on spawn. So editable, exposed on spawn. Let's go back into our controls menu. So we've now exposed 2 new variables. So we'll click on walk forwards or backwards. So for the left, we have a scale of 1, right? So walking forwards, we have a scale of 1. Walking backwards, we have a scale of -1. Then for left and right, it's a little bit different. So it's a scale of 2 and -2. Okay, so now it knows what scale to look for. Now we just need to make it use that scale. So we'll go back into here, and anytime we use a scale, we want to just set that. So we're setting the left key selector, so we want to use the left scale. And over here, we want to use the right scale. So instead of -1, it'll be -2, or just whatever the right scale variable is. Same for here. For left, we want to use left scale. And right, we want to use right scale. Then this should work. It's now looking for the scale based on what this variable is instead of just flat, 1 and -1. Okay, so you can see if we change we have A and D. Let's change A to a Z. Okay, so we have Z and D. Okay, so it does work now, right? And now it knows what scale to actually look for. Okay. Right, so that's all working good, right? So now we do have this, okay, I guess there's a couple other things I can talk about real quick. So the reason, so in this project, all I have is jump. Let me just change all these to spacebar, WS, A, and D. Okay, so I have my movement all good. So the reason I didn't set up turning like with the mouse, kind of like in a first-person shooter game, is that things like turning are a little bit, like say using the mouse to look around, that's generally not something that you want to change for the player, right? Because, right, so I can't click inside of this. I can't tell it to use mouse, right? I can't because it's listening for a key, but me moving the mouse is not a key, right? So say I wanted to, oh yeah, and I can use the mouse buttons, I just can't use, like, when I move the mouse to the right, it walks forward. You could, it's a little bit more of a different setup, which I'm not going to show in this video just because I think it's kind of a marginal case. But you can use things like the mouse button itself. So say I want to walk forwards with the left mouse button, right? And then I just click the mouse button. So now I click the mouse button, and it actually does move me forward. Okay, and I could also use, I think, a scroll wheel. Let me check. Yeah, so I could also use the scroll wheel, clicking on it. And I guess any other special keys that I have on my mouse. So that all works good. This was, kind of just an overview of how you can set this up. It's nothing special. Now again, this does use the input key selector that we have inside of 4.17. Now let me just bring up my product page really quick. See if my internet wants to load it. Maybe it won't. Oh, maybe it will. Okay, so I'm just going to bring you to my product page here. So, on side of the project page, you do have the example projects. The example projects are almost like what I made here. So like it's kind of like a thing you can download that's pre-made. The example project does not use input key selector, right? Which is just like a super easy way for us to just know what key the user presses. So in my demo project, I basically made my own input key selector. So whether or not you want to use that, it's up to you. It's just a lot easier in 4.17. It's a much cleaner setup. I guess one thing I'll show really quick is, I guess I'll show you one thing that doesn't work right now. Let's actually test it. Let's do Control F. Okay, so it does work for, yeah, so Control F. We can use like Alt, let's see, let's do Control Alt F. Whoops, that's D. Okay, so we can use like Control Alt F. I did press Control Alt F. It's actually not showing here. For some reason, it doesn't show if you use like more than one modifier key. But you can see in my project settings, this is F with Alt. Let's do Control. Let's see. So I'm gonna do Alt Control F. That's weird. Let's try that again. Control Alt F. Okay, it's being weird for whatever reason. Maybe it doesn't let you use more than one modifier key. I don't know. But let's go ahead and test if this works for... Actually, it wouldn't. Yeah. So, never mind. That was all I had to show you guys. This should be working fine. Like if I try to do Control F on left, it actually just does F. So what you could do is inside of Input Template Pair, you could click on these input key selectors and then just disable. So you could uncheck this allow modifier keys. Then it wouldn't let the user type in something like you'll see. Yeah, so I can't do Control F anymore or Alt F. So that all works good. But that's going to be it for this video. If you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and email me. You can find my email on my seller page. Just go to the Easy Input Remapping product page, then click on my name at the top. If you're enjoying my product, please give it a rating so others can know how you liked it. Just whatever rating you feel it deserves. But that'll be it. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.